The veneer of civilization is all too thin. How quickly it can all fall apart. Our rules, our laws, are revealed for what they are, an attempt to impose order where there is only chaos. In 2015, at the height of the Christmas shopping season, an engineered virus based upon smallpox was unleashed upon an unsuspecting New York. Contaminated dollars were spent and changed hands, infecting countless, spreading in their ignorance, and before any were the wiser, it spread across much of the United States and the world. The virus proved itself incredibly deadly, wiping out as many as 90% of its hosts, construction crews, electrical engineers, pilots, doctors, and with their deaths, infrastructure crumbled, as all attempts to contain the virus failed. America staggered beneath the weight of countless dead, and people changed. Some clung to their ideals with a delusional or fanatic zeal that things remained unchanged. Others engaged in monstrous behavior, justifying their actions as being necessary for their own survival. Or perhaps they finally revealed who they really were, set free to do as they pleased. To retain a semblance of order and to rebuild society, surviving first responders and National Guard units in cities across America were combined into joint task force regiments. In their fear and panic, extreme solutions were authorized to wipe out the virus forever. DC-62 was one such case. An untested chemical was pushed through, unleashed, burn, and sterilize infected areas. And while it did indeed kill the virus, when it came to be exposed to real-world conditions, it proved itself equally deadly. In Washington, D.C., the situation continued to deteriorate. The virus wreaked havoc. Riots and violence dominated the streets, and whole units of the National Guard, police, and fire department personnel were worn down to non-existence. In light of this loss in personnel, or were shuffled to fill in the growing gaps in administration. One such figure, Antoine Ridgway, a colonel in the Maryland National Guard, was named the acting general overseeing the southwest portion of DC and directly responsible for supervising and supporting quarantine camp on Roosevelt Island. As his casualties mounted, he grew more and more disgusted with command, viewing them as timid, as weak, as cowards hidden away from the situation on the ground, protected by their own bubble of security. Increasingly, Ridgway's methods diverged from central command, placing the lives of his soldiers, of his people, above all others. He diverted shipments of food and medicine away from the quarantine camp, and he adopted a shoot-first rules of engagement for dealing with rioters, insurgents, or the sick. The Joint Task Force was slow to respond to these new actions. A few bureaucratic reprimands were issued for his soldiers' harsh handling of civilian protest, but it wouldn't be until he sealed the quarantine zone, locking the sick and medical personnel away, and personally shot an unarmed civilian, that he would be arrested, stripped of his rank, relieved of command, and ultimately court-martialed. Throughout the process, he stood by his decision to protect his men, as it was his highest duty. Stripped of his rank, he was imprisoned in a makeshift stockade. Yet his incarceration would be short-lived, as troops loyal to the general stormed the facility, killing the guards and any who stood in their way. Freeing Ridgway and any of the other imprisoned soldiers. Ridgway led these newly independent forces in a brash campaign of retribution, arresting the JTF senior leadership, convening tribunals against them, and lining them up against the wall and gunning them down. Amid these declining conditions in Washington, the President of the United States ordered the remaining senior leadership to evacuate the city. All the while, this growing mutiny broke the JTF, as like-minded units joined with this newly christened True Sons of Liberty. Across the city, JTF positions fell one by one, their holdings eventually reduced to a small perimeter around the White House. And having captured the Capitol building, the True Sons transformed it into their central operating base, transformed it into a fortress secured with autocannons, regular patrols, and stocked with weapons, ammo, and vehicles to sustain an extended campaign to secure their power across DC. Their forces secured both symbolic landmarks so that they might mark their legitimacy and key strategic positions to control movement about the city. Survivors who found themselves living within territories controlled by the True Sons were handled harshly. They were expected to make regular payments of tribute to their overlords in the form of food, medical supplies, or labor. They were expected to answer any question or serve in any capacity that was deemed fit, and any resistance was snuffed out. All of this to position themselves as the dominant power, a position that drew in the fanatics, the self-indulgent, the sycophants, and any who dreamed of power or who had lost faith in the system, and a position that saw envious and hostile eyes cast upon the True Sons. Some kept a wary, if not openly hostile, distance, and some within the Sons questioned the atrocities they committed, while the surviving gangs, nominally united, hold what territories they could, and to the surviving JTF and their strategic Homeland Division allies, the True Sons were marked as public enemy number 1. Beginning what would become a prolonged battle for control of the city and its inhabitants. The True Sons began this conflict from a position of power. Their troops, well-disciplined, well-supplied, were easily able to crush gang incursions. And their first priority was to secure the Smithsonian Castle. Yet their repeated assaults were repelled by the settlement's defenders. These defeats, combined with guerrilla tactics from the Hyenas and a coordinated assault by the division, ate away at the Suns' power base. In a show of force, they gathered the chemical remnants of DC-62 into mortar shells to bombard the castle. And though they would be driven from their position in Jefferson Plaza, their attack killed the settlement, killed all but 7 of its inhabitants. This, however, did little to dissuade further attacks against the True Sun. In fact, it motivated the division into a flurry of assaults aimed at destroying the Sun's capacity to build chemical weapons. These assaults began to take their toll, as a number of veterans, leaders of the True Sons forces were lost, and their replacements lacked the skill or the experience to fully fill in the gap. In a move that they hoped would cripple the division and end these relentless attacks, a number of personnel and chemical mortars were quietly transferred to the Lincoln Memorial, preparing to unleash new attacks against the settlement at George Washington University. However, before any such bombardment could take place, division agents stormed the memorial, killing what soldiers were present and securing the weapons. Forced onto their back foot, the remaining True Sons mustered at the Capitol building. Weakened but unbroken, they met the division and their allies in a frantic defense. And despite desperate and wild counterattacks, they were pushed back, step by step. Even Ridgway himself proved incapable of breaking this invasion, falling before the onslaught. With the bulk of their leadership dead, their bases of operations gone, the remaining forces scattered, torn down from their position of power, collapsing into small gangs, each seeking to hoard the resources they possessed, scare the civilians into submission, and to reorganize and ultimately survive. Even so, Washington continued to crumble as radicals worked to deploy a new and deadlier form of the green flu, and with the arrival of a new power that dominated the landscape, the Black Tusks, the division and their allies fought for a time that the True Sons were destroyed as an effective fighting force, unaware that they had already begun to reorganize, some to General Anderson, Ridgway's former right-hand man, who had worked quietly to rebuild his forces. Still others flocked to the tough-as-nails Colonel Morozva, a veteran of high-level operations, a figure who broke Academy records and whose history has been redacted into oblivion. But most importantly, she was a true believer. The strength of her belief echoed within those around her, inspiring either hope or fear. Under her leadership, the True Sons secured the United Ironworks facility. There, they gave the plant workers a choice: submit, work for the True Sons, put their knowledge of the plant to work, construct weapons, or die. In their labor, new and advanced weapons were built. Scavenged division tech was restored and transformed. With it, the True Sons rebuilt their power, perhaps most exemplified with the construction of the Iron Horse, a train clad in thick sheets of metal armor, armed with cannons that could shake the very earth. A train that was made to reclaim DC and then America. This restoration in some ways blinded the Sons to a new weakness, a dependence on the workers of the furnace, a dependence that granted these workers a degree of freedom, a freedom which allowed one such worker to leak these developments to the division. And shortly thereafter, a division strike team was sent in, and once more the True Sons were forced to mount a defense hardened with the use of nanite-infused armor, riot foam, and flame-resistant body armor. Even so, the division pushed on through the furnace and made battle against the Colonel's last troops, all in the shadow of their great iron train, a train that was derailed, and as the Colonel made her final stand, its cannons bellowed the dying cries of an iron beast. All the while, General Anderson operated from an undisclosed location. He was slow to make his presence known, as he continued to rebuild his forces. He dreamed of establishing new chapters across America and building a new empire from the corpse of the old. From the shadows, a contingent of troops headed by a Captain Lewis were dispatched to the capital. Their mission to covertly study these new arrivals, these Black Tusks. This force was slaughtered nearly to the man, only their captains surviving, ironically due to the timely intervention of division forces. Forced to accept his position, Anderson acknowledged that his troops could not contend with both the Black Tusks and the division. As such, he negotiated a peace with the Tusks. His forces would be supplemented by Black Tusk mobile support and supplied with freshly imported weapons. And though they regained a bit of their former power, they were reduced to little more than a glorified security force. These conditions for many proved disillusioning. The hardships they had suffered, the atrocities they had committed to seize power, all to be sidelined and subordinated to Black Tusk operators. Those the most remorseful harbored traitorous thoughts, and under the leadership of Captain Lewis, opened secret negotiations with the JTF, that a number of them might defect or surrender. These clandestine negotiations did not remain quiet for long. Their communique was intercepted by the Black Tusk. They soon made Anderson aware. He moved swiftly to cut off these traitors, locking some away and executing others as a show of his authority. Yet, these actions served to further isolate Anderson, and he increasingly came to rely upon Black Tusk for his own security and to oversee critical operations. So it was when the division moved against him, it was a Black Tusk agent who oversaw security operations, successfully holding off the division agents long enough to deprive them of nearly all of the traitorous troops and to ensure Anderson escaped to points unknown. And though he survived, and his remaining troops stand loyal to the ideals first espoused by Ridgway, and now serve Anderson without question, it is clear to even the most casual observer that the true sons are not partners of Black Tusk. They are subordinate, reduced to little more than vassals, and ultimately their future is now far beyond their own hands.